Junior church, you are dismissed to walk. The end of October is upon us. Bye. And one of the things that these kids are going to be looking for is candy, Halloween, trick-or-treating, right? I'm not giving out candy today. Sorry. Yeah. But that also means something else. It is time to scare people. Right? I mean, sometimes it is very fun to scare people. There's a fright night at many of the amusement parks, and people go to ride these rides and also have scary things chase them. Scary movies, there's haunted houses, costume parties that all play off this idea of being scared. I enjoy scaring people. We've come to a term or an arrangement in our marriage. I'm no longer allowed to scare my wife since 2 years married. If I want to be married to her, I can't scare her anymore. So I take all that out on everyone else. I'm driving, and the boys, they're in the car, and it's all quiet, and then all of a sudden I just go, ah! And they're like, oh! Austin jumps off the seat, and then I have to pull over because I'm having an asthma attack, and I don't want to crash, and it's so awesome. I love it. Jackie, I've scared her a few times. Come into the office, she doesn't know I'm here, and then I just come in. Hey, she's going to get me back. I've got Nicole before. I got Kelly Talek the other day. I was just standing right there. She came in, looked around, didn't see me. She started ready to get cleaning, and I'm just standing there. And then all of a sudden she turns, she almost fell over. She screamed. I laughed. Great day. Scaring people can be fun. But there's another side of it. There are people who are gripped with fear. They are plagued with fear upon fears, and to them it's not fun to be scared. Their fears are about safety, their mental state, their health, their finances, and the list can keep going on what these fears are. There are times that fear can guide us and keep us safe. Without fear of falling, we would just walk off the side of a cliff. Without fear of pain, we would carelessly handle equipment. Fear can guide us like that, but fear can cripple us. When we let that fear in the central part of our vision, it blocks everything else out. Now really hear me on that. When we let fear become the central part of our vision, it blocks everything else out. Much of our lives are spent worrying about the future of what might happen. And many times we worry about the possibilities than the probabilities. And Jesus encouraged us to pay attention. Time magazine cover had this: why we worry about the wrong things. Now, in that article, it says, we pride ourselves on being the only species that understands the concept of risk, yet we have a confounding habit of worrying about mere possibilities while ignoring probabilities. Building barricades against perceived danger while leaving ourselves exposed to real danger. The news calls this the fire alarm syndrome. They tell us the sky is falling, and then the rest of the people run around in panic and in fear. Here's what fear can be defined as then: irrational anticipation of harm from possibilities in the future. That is one terminology or one way to define fear. The problem with this style of fear, as time points out, we focus on the possibilities. Well, this could happen. Well, this could happen, while ignoring the probabilities that this actually will happen. We focus on the imaginary. Now, how does that work in the Christian life? Let's be honest here. Many of us in this room worry. Many of us in this room have fears. We worry and we have fears about our health. and our wealth. We worry about how we're going to make it. We worry about those possibilities instead of the probability of realizing God said, I will be with you. I will take care of you. We worry about the evil in the world while ignoring the flesh in our own lives. We all get anxious about the coming disasters in the whole world that paralyzes us from being evangelists, of going out there and actually telling people about how to receive real safety from the problems of this world. We're almost done in our study of Luke. This whole year we've been going through the book of Luke, looking at being authentic disciples of Christ. Now, as I say we're getting near, you're going to notice there's some more chapters after that. If you were here, we went through them during Easter time. So it's not like I'm skipping them. We just did things out of order a little bit. In Luke chapter 21, when we're here there today, Jesus tells his disciples about both the near and far future. But in the midst of it, on this particular course of mind, his heart and action, he says to stop fear and have bold trust in him and his plan for them. I think in this we can learn a very valuable lesson in fighting the fear of our fate or of our future in our own lives. We have fear. Let's face it. I've talked to many of you. We have fear of retirement. Are we going to have enough to make it? Are we going to be able to make ends meet? We have fear of what our kids are going to be like or what they're going to be able to do. We have fear in our relationships. There are so many fears, and we need to hold those fears and set them aside for a moment and come to the truth first. And then we're going to look at those fears through His Word. And it needs to be in that order. So in chapter 21, Jesus gives us clear clues about incredible change that's going to happen soon in Israel's future, but also not just their near future, but their long-term future. And with that change, he gives a warning and encouragement. I love when he wraps these in together. He gives them a warning and an encouragement, saying two things. I am with you. That's the encouragement. And here's the warning. And I am in control. I am with you, but even when things are going bad around you, just know I am in control. I think these are words that you and I need to hear often. We need to know that Jesus is saying to you in the midst of your troubles, in the midst of the turmoil, the fears, and the worry, I am with you. And even in the midst of this, He is saying, I am God. Now with that thought, now how's those fears look? It just starts diminishing them. They're huge when we put them here, but when we put truth here, those fears start shrinking. One thing we need to realize as we make our way through this chapter, and a lot of this chapter is going to be prophecy, is that with prophecy, God has near and far future events mixed together. When He talks about them, they're going to be jumbled up in our minds. We're not going to understand them. You are never going to fully understand prophecy. Okay? Do you know why? You're not meant to. Then you would be trusting those words instead of trusting the guy who's saying, here's a little snippet. Trust me. Okay? Here in this chapter, Jesus talks about the destruction of Jerusalem, which will happen in 70 AD, and times approaching His second coming. So we've got the destruction of Israel and His future coming, which is thousands of years difference. And He's going to talk about them almost interchangeably. We begin really at the tail end of chapter 20. The subject is giving. Jesus talks about giving. We saw this last week. He's comparing the money-grubbing scribes who had an outward appearance of righteousness, but their actions reveal inward characters so debauched by their lifestyles, they steal the widow's money. Now let's start in chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box. Real quick, I just want you to know when people are putting money in the offering plate, you'll notice I am not one of those who generally collects those plates. I don't like that. And here's why. It's not that I don't think it's a good thing. We need to be giving. I don't want you sitting there as I'm standing there, so you're thinking, did he know how much I put in or not put in? Is he thinking bad thoughts about that, or wonder what he's thinking? Here's I'm going to say this real clear, I hope. I don't care how much you give. That's between you and God. It is. I don't care. We have a treasurer who keeps track of it for your tax purposes. I never know who gives or how much anyone gives. It's not my job. So if you ever see me looking around, it's never because of money. It's because I forgot something, and I'm trying to find out where I can get the help for that, okay? And I look around a lot, okay? So just know, I am not doing that. And Paul, or Jesus here, he is seeing that these people are coming. They're bringing money. So in verse 2, and Jesus saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on. In the temple, there are several ways that they used to give. We used to, we pass the plate, and that's how they've always done it. No. This is a convenience way. Back in that time, you'd walk into the temple, and there was a box, and you would go put your money in. That's how they did tithing in Jesus' day. Okay, so they would go in there, and there were several containers, and you'd go up to different ones. There was one that was for temple tax. The others were free will offerings. And a lot of the money for the temple would come in through the Passover, and Jesus is sitting there watching as people go to put in their tithes and their offerings. And some people go and they make a big show. They go and they hold it above it so that when it drops, it makes a large, loud sound. Well, I used to do that when I was little, and Mom would give me some coins, and I would hold it way up there so that it would make a big sound, like, see how much I gave? And then there was kids who would flip the bottom of the plate so it would jingle them, and it looked like they gave, but they put nothing in. And then there were some that would tap it and catch the ones that popped up and put it in their pocket. I did not do that. There was all these different ways of giving, and all of those were done for show. Mine was for show. The others were for show. One was for stealing based on a deception of show. People at this time were coming and they were making the large, here I come to place my offering before God. Stand away, I've got to carry this offering. And they were making these big shows, and then Jesus sees this 2 widow. And in the midst of these loud clinking sounds, you hear 2 pin drop sounds. Luke doesn't reveal how Jesus knew, whether by her dress or a revelation from the Spirit, but he calls out this widow. Jesus points something out. She drops 2 coins in. Now, I want you to know how little she actually gives. This was about 1/8 of a penny each. 1/100th of that day's wage. She gave hardly anything financially. It wasn't the size of the gift that Jesus marveled at, because people before were bringing in bags of money. But it's the size of the hole left in her life that Jesus marvels at. See, it's not how much you give, but how much you have left over that matters. This woman trusted God so much, she gave everything she had to live on and said, God will provide. It showed the depth of her love and her commitment. These other people gave out their abundance. They said, I'm going to give this much money, and guess what? I have 10 times that at home to take care of myself. This woman said, this is all I have for the day, and maybe even tomorrow. But I trust God that much. And when we read this, we need to realize Jesus is marveling at her. Are you committed so much to God that you give to Him until you feel it in the lack of things you may have at home? Here at St. Joe Church of Christ, we trust that God will provide our needs, which is why I do preach on giving. I preach on it because it's in the Bible. It's an uncomfortable topic. You want to make someone uncomfortable, start asking them about their money. Start telling them how they need to spend it. And you're going to get these walls coming up, and that's none of your business. How dare you? But it's in Scripture, so I don't tell you what to say. I don't care. That's not my job. I tell you what Scripture says, and then you talk with God about that. It's found in Scripture, but also giving is an important part of a maturing Christian. While there is no law of tithing in the New Testament, there is ample evidence of giving in the church all throughout the New Testament. Our tithe check, or money, is the first thing we set aside each week, especially knowing that it's going to make the rest of the week tight. That's how you give in faith. You know, I don't know if we're going to be able to get all the groceries, but we're going to do this first. That tithe goes to God. It belongs to God. And no matter what else you need to hear, I've been told this many times, you cannot outgive God. You can't. You think, well, He gave me this job so I can do this. No, He gave you this job so you can show your commitment to Him for the rest of the world to see. It's not you're trying to prove to Him. It's you're trying to show yourself and the rest of the world, I trust God with everything. Do we do it so we can get financially blessed? No. Don't do it for a financial blessing. We do it because we love God. We trust Him to take care of us. And giving isn't confined just to finances, okay? That means of all your times, your talents, your materials, whatever else is around the house. And then this sets the stage for the balance of the rest of this chapter, which is about trusting God. This whole thing sets it up, and then the rest of the chapter talks about trusting God in the midst of uncertainty. I don't know if I have enough to make it. Well, trust God. There's a war coming. Trust God. All these things coming about trusting God. Still challenges us to trust God like this woman, this widow. You may be bankrupt in the world's economy. I want you to hear this. I found that this isn't my phrasing. I stole this. You may be bankrupt in the world's economy, but if you put your faith in God to provide, you're wealthy in the heavenly economy. You may not have a lot here on earth, but this earth is going to fade away and burn up. So who cares? But you will have wealth in a heavenly economy that will never go away. Now let's go to verse 5. And while some were speaking of the temple, this is, at the time, he just watched all these people give, how it is adorned with noble stones and offerings. How many times do we sit there and say, man, that's a beautiful church building. Oh, look at that gorgeous building. Look at the stained glass. Look at the walls. Look what Jesus says. He says in verse 6, as for these things you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And they asked him, Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of these things that are about to take place? And he, meaning Jesus, said, See that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he. And the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. Remember I told you we're going to talk about the end of destruction, or the destruction of Jews, and the end times, and he's talking about both here. Many people at this time period, as Jesus is talking, thought the temple was so well built. It was so well built, it was supported by the presence of God, it cannot be destroyed. That's what they really believed. You know, I think of somebody else who thought that. He built with this whole thing in construction and built this huge boat. And it will not sink. And on its maiden voyage, what happened to the Titanic? It sank. The greatest thing we can do is pitiful compared to God's economy and His plans. They thought the temple could not be torn down or destroyed. In fact, some of the original foundation stones are believed to still be there at the Temple Mount, but the fires were so hot when they were burning this that all the precious metals melted inside the temple, and they went down into the cracks of the foundation. And Jesus said, not one stone will sit on top of another. And do you know what they found? There's gold and silver and other things that went in between them and separated the foundation. Not one stone is left sitting on top of each other. Everything they thought there was precious and were going to stand the test of time was destroyed. This temple was actually rebuilt and expanded from the one in Ezra, built after Solomon's temple that was destroyed by the Babylonians. It covered 1/6 of ancient Jerusalem. This is a huge building. And in 70 AD, the Roman legions came and destroyed the temple, just as Jesus was saying. Emperor Titus ordered that the entire city, including all the walls and temple, be leveled. Those who were listening to Jesus wanted to know when that destruction would happen. Maybe they thought that the removal of one temple would make room for a bigger one. Even more glorious. They asked for what signs to look for. And Jesus doesn't talk about the temple. He says, many are going to come in my name. Wait a minute. I want to know when the temple's going to be destroyed. Well, many are going to come in my name. Because where is the temple? It's not just this building. What is the temple according to New Testament? It is the church. It is us, not a building. And many are going to come in my name, and they're going to tear you down unless you trust in me like that widow. Then the foundations of hell can't stand against you. And what are we going to be like? Jesus instead warns them not to look for signs in the world, but to believe in Him alone. Trust in Him. Not only is there going to be spiritual deception, but also political upheaval would take place. Jesus says for them not to be afraid. How many of us know what it's like to have a government that's got a little bit of an upheaval going on and political unrest? All of us. There is so much fear about where America is going. Well, if this side gets it, we know it's going to go this way. But if this side if any side without God gets control, it always goes downhill. And little side note here, whenever Christians do nothing in the voting and leading of our politics, it's our fault that the politics keep falling more and more into worldly desires and gains. Oh, they're unchristian. You're right, but somebody put them in office. And we have not been diligent at raising up generations who will stand on the principles of truth and say, I will not be moved, and I will lead as many as I can there. The government will not save you. Let me just say that. The government will not save you, ever. Only God can. And He said He will do that through the church. Through the church, the governments should be blessed. Forget the separation of church and state. The church should be over the state and saying, this is how God's economy works. And that's what we're talking about here. We need to understand that God rules us. I like this country a whole lot. I do. I like it. I don't want to live in any other country. But it comes far below in my priority list. God, wife, then my children. And they know they are after my wife because I have to live with her. They get to leave. Now I have to leave. I want to live with her. Yes, thank you. Ruth, you're sweet. She's translating for me, Casey. We need to understand where our priorities are. That the rich people who are coming in had priorities of their wealth and their economy. The widow came in with her priorities on God. And when the temple is destroyed, the people who have real priorities in God are going to sustain even without a temple. And us, without the financial without our financial stability, without government oversight, we who have faith and prioritize in God will survive and thrive in faith. I may not have a Hummer. Who cares? I may not have a big, huge house. I may not have all the aquariums I want. but I will have God. And my eternal, heavenly economy will never be taken away. Your environment can change, but God will not. Let's move on. Verse 10. Then Jesus said to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be great earthquakes in various places, famines and pestilences. There will be terrors and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. Wait a minute. I thought Jesus was about all being nice and, great. And he's saying we're going to be persecuted because of you. You're going to be delivered up to the synagogues, the religious areas, and prisons. You'll be brought before kings and governments for my name's sake. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it therefore in your minds not to meditate beforehand on how to answer. You decide now what you will say when that happens. When, not if. For I will give you a mouth and a wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends. And some of you they will put to death. You will be hated by all for my name's sake. But not a hair on your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your lives. He just switched. See, not a hair on the head will perish. He's not talking about earth here. He's talking about salvation. You're going to go through all this stuff. The temple's going to be destroyed. All your finances are going to be taken away. But your salvation, even the smallest part of that, won't be destroyed. Wars, earthly natural disasters, diseases, heavenly upheaval, personal persecution are all part of the life leading up to Christ's returns. But instead of focusing on those things, those negative things, we put those fears down and we place Christ ahead of us. Focus on what Jesus wants his followers to look at. When even a life gets totally upset by disaster, we tend to go into shock mode. We end up doing nothing. There are so many times that people have talked about when a disaster comes, there are people just standing there in shock mode, like, I don't know what to do. After a car wreck, people are kind of just shaking. And I'm not saying this is bad, but think about this in a spiritual sense. When something bad happens, do we go, I don't know what to do? When we need to decide right now, when this happens, I will look to God. It's a marvelous way to actually look at things. There's times, I just warn you, when I come to see you when you have surgery or something in the hospital, I don't pray for an immediate pain-free existence. I don't. I went to Alan's, didn't get to see him, so I prayed in the car. I went to Lanaire's, and I prayed in the midst of this that the rest of the people around could see the character of God. In the midst of going into of a surgery, in the midst of having pain afterwards, let the nurses and the doctors see they are a Christian. Because it's an opportunity to say, this is temporary. But he's not. So I want you to know, when I say that, it's not that I don't care about your earthly comfortability. It's more I'm thinking about your eternal destination and how you can bring others around you with you. This is a marvelous way to focus on the fact that Jesus will give us what we need, especially in those times of, I don't know what I'm going to say. And I can try to plan it now, but if I'm focusing on him now, and then he's going to speak in and through me. See, your security may have been threatened, but God still controls your destiny. Our earthly security might be threatened, but that's a small fear. And set it down. Where's my eternal destiny? Let's go to verse 20 through 24. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart. Let not those who are out in the country ever enter it, for these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. Alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. For there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of Gentiles are fulfilled. This here, we're seeing that the prophecy is jumping ahead into the future again. A little bit, and then it comes back again to, it's kind of confusing, isn't it? I wish Jesus spoke in our current timeline and how to do things. When this happens, Jesus says, there won't be time to collect your things, just get out. And at the verse 24, we have this statement, until the time of Gentiles are fulfilled. And that little part of verse is all of human history from 70 AD till when he comes. So the time of Gentiles is now. We are in the midst of this transition from the prophecy about Jerusalem, which already happened, and the prophecy about the end times, which is coming. That came true about Jerusalem. So what does that tell you about what Jesus is saying about the end times? It's going to come true. And you're going to have all these wars. You're going to have all these persecutions. You're going to be imprisoned. They're going to have people, and we're going to, pregnant women, nursing women, and it is going to be hard for them because they're going to have to try and figure out what to do. It is coming until the time of Gentiles is over, the time that Jesus returns. Let's go on, verse 25. And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distresses of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the seas and the waves. That's really chaotic right there. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. If you thought Jerusalem's destruction was bad, you've seen nothing until the destruction of this world. When the real judgment against sin and death comes, we don't want to be found in that place. We want to be under God. I won't go into all the details there, but Jesus did tell his disciples about the signs. Nothing like they thought. The Bible, especially in Revelation, is filled with signs that will happen in the heavens and on earth, just as Jesus said as he returns to earth. No one will ever mistake the coming of Jesus, okay? There are people who have said, well, Jesus came back and did this. Jesus said when he returns, everybody's going to see, when it's a cloud of power and authority. In Revelation 1:7, look, he comes with the clouds of heaven, and everyone will see him. There is no way Jesus comes in secret and only a few people see it. When he comes, it comes in power, authority, and we're all going to see it. Now, back to verse 28. We are not to panic and run screaming. When these things happen, don't throw your hands in the air and run crying to go to the bathroom because you're wetting yourself. Okay, because it's going to be scary. It's going to be freaky. But what are we to do? Look up, it says, because your redemption is at hand. Your world may turn upside down, but you can raise your head high because he is coming for you. Verse 29, and Jesus told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also when you see these things taking place, you know the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. As we see the branches, right now we see trees changing, don't we? And we know cold is coming. The beautiful colors are coming out on the trees, and it's a symbol that everybody needs to go huddle up under covers because it's going to get cold. And then in springtime, you start seeing that little red tint on the trees because the buds are popping out. And then the green takes, spring is coming. There could still be snow on the ground, but spring is coming. When we see these things, we need to remind ourselves Jesus is coming. In the midst of your trials, in the midst of the troubles, don't fear. Jesus is coming. He promises His return. His love will never fail. Let's go to verse 34. Watch out. Don't let your hearts be dulled by carousing and drunkenness, by the worries of life. Don't let that day catch you unaware, like a trap. For that day will come upon everyone living on the earth. Keep alert at all times and pray that you might be strong enough to escape these coming horrors and stand before the Son of Man. Every day Jesus went in the temple to teach, and each evening He returned to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. The crowds gathered at the temple early each morning to hear Him. Jesus says here to be on guard, to watch out, to be ready for those things when they happen. Don't let but how do we watch out? He said, don't let your hearts be dulled by sinful living. Don't be sleeping around. Don't be having sex outside of marriages. Don't dull your hearts in doing all these debauchery things. Keep your heart pure so you can watch out. You don't have these things in front of your face. You put them down, get rid of them, and look only at God. First, don't do that. Don't be getting drunk. Don't be getting tipsy. I've heard some people, let me tell you one thing real quick. Having alcohol is not a sin. Having a drink is not a sin. Getting drunk absolutely is. And when you start drinking to get tipsy, you've already lost control of yourself, and guess what? You have become a slave to the master of alcohol. You have just let alcohol control you. Well, I just need it to unwind. Well, that's what people say about dope, or cocaine, or meth, or about beating somebody. I just do it because I've got this pent-up energy. You're letting yourself become a slave to something else. You're letting it fill your mind. You have to give yourself only to God. Like that widow, she gave everything to God. I'm going to trust Him in everything. And that means in all of our attitudes and actions. Don't place yourself under the control of anything other than God. Not substance, not people, not fear and worry. Don't let the things of this world cause you to worry. That was a lot of stuff in that chapter. So how do we bring it down? Because there was a lot. How are we to live as Christians then? Jesus gives us 6 quick ways I'm going to tell you. First, trust God, not material wealth. Don't trust the material world. The widow who gave a tiny amount was praised by Jesus. She gave in faith. She trusted God with everything she had. And I want you to know, when Jesus said it, He said it loudly for everybody to hear. So here comes the rich guy. Look, he didn't say anything. And then this widow comes in, drops him, and goes off praying. And He says, hey, look at her. He's going to announce it. Don't trust the world, trust Him. You may be bankrupt in the world's economy, but put your faith in God to provide. You'll be wealthy in God's economy. Secondly, don't be terrified. That's in Luke 21:9. Let God give you His power, His strength to overcome the fears. And if Jesus says not to be terrified of disasters, then it's possible. If He says do not be terrified, that means there is a way to do it. Your environment will change, but God won't. So trust in Him. 3, tell others. Witness. When we are standing in the midst of fears, we need to share the reason why we somehow find strength. Somehow we keep going on. We need to tell people how they can come to know that life without fear. Situations may look bleak, but they fade away when we share the power of Christ. 4, endure. Press on. Don't give up. Continue to know that God is with you, and He will always be with you as long as you are focused on living with Him. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you. You will not be overtaken. That is not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, He will also provide the way to escape, that you may be able to endure it. I want you to, it's not that He won't give you more than you can handle. That's a false thing. God's going to give you so much more that you can't handle. It's called living. And what He's saying here is there is not a temptation on this earth that is unique to you only. But every temptation that comes, he will say, look, I will sustain you because you can't handle it. That's why my son went to the cross. And I will give you the strength to carry on and a way to get away from it. Look at all he provides for you, so you need to endure. 5, raise your head, look up. Don't go around all downcast. Don't be like Eeyore, the cute little donkey. It's not much of a tail, but I'm kind of attached to it. Cute little thing, but that's not the type of living we need to be. We need to be Pooh Bear. There's a smackerel of honey somewhere. We need to be more joyful and innocent and uplifting and encouraging. John 14 says, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Jesus is saying this. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back. Notice we're reading this in Luke 21. I will come back and take you to be with me, that you will also be where I am. I will come in the midst of all this junk in the world because you're going home with me. Do you ever remember going home with someone else for the weekend of school? You know, you get to take all your stuff and then you're looking for that bus and you're going to someone else's house. I don't have to put up with my mom. And there was excitement. And I'll tell you real quick, my friends loved coming to my house. They loved coming to my house because my mom cooked all sorts of food for them. And they looked forward to it. We get to go to Donnie's house. It's crazy there. Lots of food. We need to be living in the midst of all these troubles and trials in this world saying, I get to go home. I'm packed my bags. I'm ready to go home when Jesus brings the ride. I'm ready. Are you? Because I can take you. He's coming. And there's plenty of room there. His love for you will never fail. The world may turn upside down, but you can live with your head raised high. And then 6, watch out. Don't fall into sinful living. What that's going to do, if you're not watching out for sin, is going to breed more sinful living and more sinful living. And that's going to keep pulling you away and making you focus on fears instead of seeing God. Stay alert. 1 Peter says this. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him. Be strong in your faith. Remember that your family of believers all over the world is going through the same kind of suffering. Instead of panicking or falling into evil, be aware of your surroundings. Put your full faith and trust in God, waiting patiently and actively for His return. Those are 6 key ways that we can live trusting in Jesus alone. Now we can know the knowledge. Those Pharisees knew the knowledge. Those rich people knew the knowledge, but they still didn't live it. The poor widow lived it. She knew the knowledge and then she lived it. And that's the difference. We can know, I can say all the things, I can study it and I can know it. But until we step out and actually live it, we're not going to experience it. And it's time that you and I let go of the fears of this world. Because there are people all over the world going through the exact same thing. Which means you and I here have something incredibly awesome. We have each other for support, encouragement. Because Christ is uniting us. And that means nothing in this world will win. No matter who's elected to what government, no matter what disaster befalls, my God is God. And He's coming to take me home with you. Isn't that something we need to tell the rest of the world? Isn't that something we need to proclaim and say, I know you're having a rough time. Let me share with you what God's done in my rough times. Let's stand. Let's praise Him. Thank Him for what He's done. And then let's take that message of trusting Jesus to the rest of the world.